Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at some materials and start making this torus look a little bit nicer. So if I go to Materials Editor, and because we're on the Mental Ray Renderer, if I go to Standard here, I can scroll down and I've got lots and lots of different options here, and we're just going to focus for the moment on the Mental Ray library here. And first of all, what I'm going to do is I'll show you a nice metal or something. Let's choose something like a brushed chrome. And there will be some issues with this which I'm going to address in a bit, but for the moment we're just going to chuck this on. So I've got my material up here. If you're in a different view, by the way, if you're in, say, the Slate Material Editor, let's just go into the Compact Material Editor. And now my material's been selected by clicking here where it says Standard and choosing this. I just drag it onto my material, my object. Let me just hold the middle mouse wheel to scroll around there, pan it in view. Let's see what's happening. And you can already see that this is actually starting to give quite a nice effect. But there are some issues that we need to address. Firstly, there's no shadows here. So I'm going to turn the shadows on and we're going to look at different types of shadows. And then also this back infinity scoop is still the reference green. So we'll need to give that a material as well, like a PVC white or something. So let's address the shadows first of all. If I go to one of these lights, and I could have done this first and applied it to all three, but I think it's important we do one bit at a time. If I scroll down, and oh, it's over here, sorry, shadows on, and I'm going to apply shadows on to each of these. Make sure all three of my lights have been selected, shadows on. Let's have a little render and see what this looks like now. And what you can do is you can hear my laptop trying to work a bit more because it's trying to work out the equations of the photons from the light actually bouncing on the objects and where they're casting the shadows. Because these do represent real photons from lighting that you would actually get. Okay, you can see that this shadow here is pretty splatty actually. You know, really rough, really jaggedy, and we don't want that. So what we need to do is select the lights again, and from the shadow map here, we're just going to choose ray trace shadows, not the advanced ray trace, but ray trace shadows for each of these. And that will give us a much softer, realistic shadow effect. Just going to lower my settings down for the next render in a second. Wait for this to finish rendering. Okay, just going to lower this down a little bit. Okay, so that's our softer shadows. Now, we're going to put our background texture on, so I'm just going to select a new, fresh material slot here, and just click on Standard, and go down to, let me just see where it is, I've already passed it. Plastic here, and I'm just going to chuck on PVC white. And check that on here as well. And I can adjust, and you can do this with any of the text you put on pretty much. You can adjust the glossiness, how much indirect illumination and stuff can be, self-illumination, sorry, can be done off it, the bump, which is like the effects of it. But I'm going to just leave it straight as it is, that's for you to experiment with. Let's have a quick render now. And you'll see that we're starting to get a lot more realism into our actual image. But as this renders, one of the things you'll notice is that the textures are kind of like a bit splattered across it. It doesn't look necessarily a clean chrome this. And what's happening is, and especially, I'm just going to show you this with a wood actually first of all. I'm going to replace this material here that's already on it with wood. So let's get something that's let's get this solid stained, dark, polished birch. Okay, let's render this and have a look. And you can see up here in this window here it has a texture, but here it's not really coming off with the texture. And other materials will emphasize this even more. And the problem is, what we haven't got at the moment is our texture being projected onto this object. So we need to apply something called UVW map. And so I've got my object selected, and I'm going to scroll down to UVW map. And what UVW map does is it projects all the sides of your object with the texture. So at the moment it'd be just projecting it from the top. And what we're going to do for this one is we're going to project the texture from all the sides onto this here. I'm also going to choose real world map size. Now this will work for mine, it'll probably work for yours, but you might have to adjust the size of the textures using these options here if it doesn't look quite right. I've got it selected there, I'm just going to render it. Let's have a look. And now you can see that there's an actual grain coming through here. And that's starting to look a lot more realistic. Some of this pixelation here is due to the image precision and the final gather precision. I'm also going to apply this texture to the the UVW map to this back as well. Let's go get the UVW map, and I'm going to apply it as a box and real world scales. And that there's the scoop. I could hide that potentially, I could put another light round here, I could change the camera to get rid of it, bring it out of view a bit. You could even actually smooth this down and add it to it, but I'm not worried about that for the moment. Okay, that's starting to look like a realistic object now. Just to make the lighting look a bit more interesting, I'm going to increase the intensity of my light over here, so I'm just going to bring that up a little bit. And this can take some time to get right on however you want to do it, you know, it's down to personal preference really, and the material you're editing. In fact, those could come up even more, so what I'm going to do is just look here, probably not that much. This one over here, and I'll make it a bit more interesting. There we go, that's a bit more interesting, a bit more blue going over here, and shadows here. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to render this out in higher quality. Now one of the things you want to think about first of all is this thing called FG bounces here. So that's final gather bounces, and that can also be accessed from your render menu up here. So under global illumination you can increase the amount of final gather bounces here and the precision here. Here's your final gather options here. Here we go, diffuse bounces. So I can increase the amount of that and the precision. One should be enough, and what final gather bounces does is these lights are charged with photons that are hitting that object, and depending on the material, those photons now will bounce off onto the other materials and be absorbed or bounce again if it was 2 bounces, and gradually fade over time. So I'm going to have it on 1, and I'm going to put my final gather precision up to medium and close this down. And while this is open down here, actually, I'm just going to increase my image precision and my glossy precision. Let's bring my soft shadows up to default. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to output this for print now. So what I'm also going to do is come up to here and go to rendering, and I'm going to go to print size assistant, and here I'm going to choose, say, A5. I'm not going to choose anything too big because it will increase the amount of time that this takes to render, and I'll do it at 300 dpi, and I'm going to press render, and this will take a bit of time now, so I'm going to come back and see what this is like afterwards. Right, so here's the finished render that I did then. It took some time because obviously due to the size. That little black reflection there, that's actually the reflection of the black area all around here. And actually in real life Infinity Scoops aren't high glossy materials like this one I've put on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take down the glossiness of this background by clicking on it. And let me bring up my material editor. And here, where I've got my material selected, so this one here, I'm just going to bring down the glossiness somewhat, so it sort of gets rid of that. Maybe just leave a little bit. And also, just while that was rendering out and I paused the video, I changed my render setup back from being print size A4 output. Under common here in the render setup, I came down and just made it 800 by 600 again, so it renders out a little bit quicker, or else it would take quite a long time. Right, so here we go. I'm just going to give that a render now, see if that's got rid of the black line across the back by removing the glossiness. And there we go. So you can see now that it's got rid of that background, and it gives it a real nice sort of infinity look. So it looks like you can't see the background. Up here perhaps, you know, could still smooth out the polygons a bit if we up the amount. But that's how to do a basic studio lighting setup. So just remember that the key points are that you basically need to be in a mental ray renderer under the render settings. And then you need to create 3 lights, which are photometric lights, but you don't have to add the exposure control. Once you've done that, you then have to enable the ray trace shadows, not the advanced ray trace, the normal ray trace shadows. Then you just texture your material, your object, sorry, with your material. And once you've done that, you apply a UVW map to whatever has been textured. So that's the end of this tutorial. If you wanted to go on and see about caustics, which is how light can shine through glass and different other sort of materials which refract and bend light in different ways and create a realistic look that way, then please view my other tutorial after this. Thank you very much.